Rachel, Scott, hey, congratulations for your documentary, Pay or Die.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
People's going to enjoy this documentary, especially the fact that it affects so many Americans here in the United States.
Unfortunately, yes, this is true. We wish it wasn't so, but it is. So we're glad that we could bring this issue to light.
Terrific. And more of a congratulation that it's being showcased at the upcoming South by Southwest. How do you folks feel about that?
We're super stoked. We think it's a great festival to be part of. It's a very inclusive festival. It's going to be our world premiere. And we just love that the festival opens up the opportunity to have discussions about this. So this is a great opportunity for us to start the film process, moving the film, having its life.
Great. This documentary is fascinating and both educational at the same time, but we have to ask is what sparked you to do this documentary in the first place?
Absolutely. Well, for those who don't know, I am living with type 1 diabetes. I've had the condition for well over 10 years now. And, being a filmmaker and a freelancer at the same time, it always occurred to me that, I'm fortunate enough I'm able to afford health insurance, but it is expensive. And it's one of those things that I do think about constantly. Well, what if I don't make enough money the next month? Am I going to be able to afford it? And what am I going to have to do? So it's always kind of been instilled to me. And I knew this issue was happening, in America, but it wasn't actually until Rachel and I started collaborating together. We met on a production, and when we were discussing about this issue, Rachel was explaining to me a little bit more about her background as a journalist covering, medical refugees. Rachel's from Australia and she's worked for a lot of international news outlets. And when we started discussing it, it was kind of like, wow, this is maybe a bigger issue than we thought. And it wasn't until we went to Canada where Rachel was like, go into the pharmacy, see if you can get it cheaper. And that was it. I walked in and the pharmacist brought out all the different vials, and I was like, wow, they were $20 Canadian dollars a vial versus what I'm paying in the United States, a few hundred. But it was, as Rachel always likes to put it, I said to her, I feel like I'm a kid in a candy shop. But at the same time, it was this mixed emotion of feeling like, oh my God, I'm actually feeling accepted, but I'm not in my own country. And that's when we knew that we needed to make this film. And we came back, and that's kind of what sparked it. And I'll let Rachel kind of carry on about the research. And
Yeah, I mean, it was quite an extensive process when we got back, because unfortunately, fortunate from a storyteller's point of view, but unfortunately there was so many people that we discovered were facing this fate of not being able to access their life-saving medication. So we had people reach out to us and tell us their stories, which was, really shocking, I think, for us to be able to kind of see firsthand that there were so many people that were in this situation, which is why we knew, again, we had to tell these people's stories.
So how did you find the three families to get involved into this project, and what did you do to convince them?
Yeah, I mean, so starting off with Nicole and her husband, James, within the community itself, everyone had heard about their story, losing their son, Alec, who aged off their health insurance at the age of 26 and who had to ration his insulin because he couldn't afford it that month, and unfortunately passed away only 3 weeks after going off his parents' health insurance. And we follow the journey of them passing this bill and the toll that this has taken on them as a family. Then we found a mother and daughter who are both type 1 diabetics, and the extent that they were going to try and access their medication, driving miles and miles and miles, because the pharmacy that they were allowed to get their insulin from was dictated by their insurance. So we found their story just in a local paper showing the lengths that they were going to. And then Cara, she was a newly diagnosed type 1 at the height of COVID. And we follow her story grappling with a pandemic, and a new illness and condition that she's trying to learn and understand, from the physical, emotional, before she even thinks about the financial. So in order for us to gain access to them, I think, and I'll let Scott explain this a bit more, I think it was important from Scott as a type 1 himself and myself as a type none to really be able to relate to them on a personal level.
Yeah. One of the things as we started producing the film, getting in production, and the community word was going around the community, it was amazing how many people responded to this project, and how many people were sharing their stories. And of course, we wanted to tell them all, but I think for the purpose of making a telling film that could rise above just the diabetes space and kind of get more people involved to see how unfortunate this issue is, we really wanted to tell different angles of the story. We have Nicole and James, the mother and father who lost their son Alec, fighting on the state level in Minnesota, trying to pass bills, to going to a mother and daughter being the medical refugees, leaving the country to afford insulin, and to Kara, who is newly diagnosed. But I think what's really interesting is we were able to tell all different angles of an issue to kind of globalize it.
So did you have 3 separate crews to follow 3 separate families, or did you actually had one crew and you followed one family at a time?
We had us. This is the crew. two of us. I think though that is what made it the film what it is and so special, because they were able to build trust with us early on, being able to relate to Scott as a type 1, and feel that he knew firsthand exactly what they were going through. And I think that was extremely important, because we're showing very emotional, physical, and dire situations, and are really with them through these personal experiences over such a long time. So for us to be able to film this so intimately, and for our audience to feel as though they're right there with these subjects experiencing what they're experiencing, we had to make it extremely intimate with just, bootstraps on the ground and just the 2 of us.
With Alec's family, was that just a coincidence that you followed them through the legislative process, or that was all deliberate?
What do you mean coincidence?
Like that they were going through the legislative process of passing this bill at the time.
Absolutely. We came at a time where, the issue was becoming very prevalent in the media, and they were, trying to pass this bill. And, it's amazing. It took 4 years to pass the bill almost, and it was a hard 4 years, kind of seeing Nicole and James, their ups and downs, the toll it took on them as a family, but also the fight that they just were so committed and didn't give up on, and that to us was, what really created their story.
And I think too, is that gravitas of showing how long that process takes to really, fight the issue, fight up against Big Pharma, the insurance companies, the PBMs, and all of the different layers involved, and that it is such a systematic issue. And there are so many players within this, big issue that is evolved. And to show like the David and Goliath story of that, we wanted to capture that as time went on, which was another reason why we followed the story for all those years.
Extraordinarily, you also followed the story during the pandemic. How was the challenges of that, and how that adjusted to your story?
When we started with Kara's story, it was the height of the pandemic. There was a lot of unknown. Restrictions were tight in some places, were loose in others. But also myself having type 1 diabetes, and Kara having type 1 diabetes, there was a lot of discussion of, are we comfortable with this? And, I really wanted to show her struggle of dealing with this in a pandemic, and she was open to it. We wore masks, we did everything we can to be protecting ourselves. It was difficult, it was challenging, right? There was no, as filmmakers, we haven't gone through something like this before. So it was a lot of trial and error, what we can and can't do, and how we could be safe in the field. I mean, we were, like I said, it was Rachel and I. Sometimes it was just me alone. Yeah,
But I think it also showed the stark reality of what people face with an autoimmune condition during the pandemic. It was awful for so many of us, but with people that, have type 1 diabetes and other conditions, it was,
more to think about.
More to think about, and just that extra level of the unknown. And for Kara to have that, as well as trying to understand what type 1 was, it just showed the extreme pressure that she was under.
And I will say, and we've talked to Kara about this, she felt very comfortable having us there. I think she liked the support because she was so away from everyone. She couldn't see her family. Her family didn't get to see her, during her diagnosis, and being there in that time. It was almost like for her, as she kept saying, you guys are kind of like the support system, allowing me to be me and tell my story and vent of what I'm struggling with.
Now, obviously, this film is coming out at South by Southwest, but a lot of things have changed, as you're aware of, just in the past 3 months alone, between Biden forcing Medicare to accept it, to limit it at $35 an hour, Eli Lilly actually dropping their price, or even the state of California trying to possibly come up with their own insulin factory. Could you talk about how this film will still remain relevant then?
It's more than relevant, I think. We could start off with the was the reduction, the Biden's reduction act. I mean, it was Medicare, which is great. It's for people that are 65 years and older, but let's be realistic. People that are really struggling are people that are aging off their health insurance, young people, new careers. Maybe they're out of college, they have some college debt, they have a new career that's giving them a salary that's a little too high to get onto a state program or incentive, but not enough to afford their insulin. So those are the individuals that are really at risk. And I think what's really interesting, Eli Lilly making this voluntary move as of like a week ago to slash prices on insulin at $35 is great, but I think it's because of all the advocacy and the pressure. But I think it's also really important, not that I think, it is really important to know that this was a voluntary move within Eli Lilly to make this call. This was not pressure by government, any legislative bill. And we can't let this steer the narrative of that they create the solution. Bills need to be passed because at any given moment, they have the power to raise the price back up. 2024 elections are around the corner. I believe what they're doing is a good first step to discuss it. But at the same time, let's make sure bills are passed so that the prices are affordable and everyone has access to it.
And I think that's why our film is so relevant, because people need to understand this issue from a human perspective so that everyone can see exactly what is going on, get behind these bills, write to their legislators, and make sure that, bills are passed on a federal level so that this can't keep happening.
Most excellent. Well, hey, thank you for driving this conversation with Pay or Die for diabetes. As for myself, I am a type 2 diabetic myself, and I did catch COVID early on and went to the hospital, got into the hospital because of my diabetes with COVID. And right now, I'm not struggling with insulin. I'm not on insulin, but I am struggling with other medications such as Rybelsus and now Ozempic, which is a medication that I do need, but I can't get because celebrities use it as a diet pill. So
the ridiculous world that we live in here. And again, this is why it needs to change for all medications, not just insulin.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for starting this conversation, and let's hope that everything ends well. Enjoy South by Southwest.
Thank you so much.